So, just to put everything into context, like Anne-Christine said, I was doing a Master's 2 last year, and Anne-Christine sur le bon, and I was fortunate enough to follow the preparation of the workshops whilst doing literature reviews and conducting internal investigation. Okay, let's move on to the next slide then. And so there's been, we managed a survey, we implemented a survey internally, but we want to praise the situation, the representations of the ethical thinking amongst health professionals before drafting conclusions and trying to find the best way of changing things. And so we drafted a scientific article entitled a study the approach of anchoring a strategic thinking, the public health realm, the experience of public health France. Next slide, please. And just to be, by way of brief reminder, this article is a thesis which is defended. I'm trying to submit it to a review. We're trying to define pragmatic ethics, and we had to create the CED. There's a committee for orientation and dialogue, and which made it possible to create a form of a merger with themselves and other bodies. As a first part, was the choice of setting up local ethic units. We had to build workshops for them, and also today, which I'm going to take a closer look at, ethics is not a cause business. What are the needs and expectations from public health professionals in France? But there's also a part of the discussion would focus on the barriers that public health professionals might run into as a result. Let's move on to the next slide then. So 16 semi-directive interviews were conducted. We've got a table which sets out the direction as fortunate. It's very heterogeneous. It created a degree of primacy because not everyone speaks with the same training, not everyone has the same responsibility level. And 2 interviews with the members of the COD and one from member of the project team. And they're all analysed in a symmetrical manner. So here you've got the stats for the regional directors, public health professionals, and members of the Committee for Orientation and Dialogue of COD. Now, the first observation we have to draw, what Mark said, was there is amongst a feeling, it's a very political concept. They're not comfortable. There's a lack of clarity. They say they're not comfortable what it really means. We don't know exactly what it means or where it goes. And when we ask them what definition to give to an ethical approach, they listed various items rather than give definition. Only 4 out of 5 in these interviews mentioned the term value out of values. And there are some not incorporated into the internal organizational matrix. But a lot of the other information is not just being handled by the agency, but handled in a fashion which is ecosystemic. Now, there's some bits of an answer which were given, which it's a debate about individual protection, like wearing a seatbelt, or physical, well, individual protection rather as collective protection. And all this can be explained by awareness-raising exercises, or perhaps a university itinerary, as an idea amongst health professionals there's a philosophical aspect from ethics, very far from the minds of people taking key decisions. So we tend to forget that ethics are not part of our customs. But before taking a decision, it has to be scientifically correct, legally correct. So the agents have to accept that ethics has moved down to the second stage, because people say we've got immediate needs, and so they deal with those, and then not with ethics, or they say they don't have the means for dealing with ethics or tackling it. And people agree to say there's a lack of accompaniment, and you shed light on these questions. One agent says, we see questions which should mobilize people on an identity basis, but I don't pass them on because they've not been certified or identified. And if you have a lack of knowledge about ethics, because there's a very regulatory legal framework, they were saying first of all the priority comes to the law. They're all very much mindful of LGPDR and that go GPDR. There where we answer where the jury hasn't provided a clear answer. It's a very fine comparison between public health and compared to environmental health as well, where the law is not very specific, it's a bit fuzzy, so ethics would be effective. So this idea that ethics is perhaps replacing the legal framework when the need arises. And then this has meant that this is coordinated with that there is a lack of knowledge on part of the Ethics and Conduct Committee. A few opportunities taken interest in this. I've never come across it, and I don't know how to solicit it. And I don't know or get funds from Health Public France. The second recognition is a real need to incorporate ethical thinking amongst agents and in their discourse. Now, they acknowledge they don't know everything. The sense is important. They feel a bit ill-equipped with regards to these questions. And we have to change paradigm. It's not the cherry cake. It's something that's absolutely fundamental, and this is this kind of change which we difficult to implement. It's no longer optional. It's obligatory. So it needs to willingly, to consciously, formally incorporate ethics, and enable us to create for health institutions mentioned in science crises, and to win back trust from the public after the COVID-19 crisis. And this happened when we had interviews for people living in the regions and who contact the local population. And the strategic thinking would make it possible to raise our game a bit. Moving on, and they agree, saying it's given meaning to our line of work. It's given a sense of purpose. It's by better guiding their choices, by creating better operational space, and sometimes there have been some perverse effects despite best intentions being very present. Now, the third lesson, the third point, was very significant. Many different questions, as said earlier on. Many health agents question for very different management systems. So one of the groups gave a lot of answers, very specific answers. And so I tried to get them to do most of it, and to get involved as based on the value of participation. They agreed amongst having lay people working with scientifics, it's no easy task, and it creates a sort of balance of power situation, conflict situation. And you to have your own institutional game, enjoy your own autonomy. Now, ethics is not just about the involvement, it's the problems of data. The data which may potentially identify people when there's a particular low threshold. We might think of impulse, for example. We've got everything with communication of data, which is amplified in emergency situations, and the question of transparency is therefore raised with regard to stigmatization that one might undergo. But one shouldn't really be that anxious about that, and on the limits of communicating effectively during the COVID crisis. There's the problem of the temporal or time dimension. Is the threshold is significant? Is the one that needs to warn the population about? And we accept data which is not public between public France. We've got to find this, strike the right balance between individual freedom and collective freedom. Interpreter apologizes. The lady speaker is speaking at top speed, and some people have the impression that they not really, whether doing ethics are really at the heart of the wisdoms, and they wonder whether the actions they take correspond to the needs of the population and whether efficient. Now, there's the concept of nudge and social marketing. That we enter into the head of people who are acting upon their behavior. So these approach, which are borrowing forms of logic, which are almost manipulative nature and reduce the decision-making freedom and autonomy of individuals, and it's creating value-based judgments. It's very normative. As like a colleague referred to at the beginning, was the factory for the costs of poor behavior. And then we've got the independence with regard to public authorities, with strong tension between what they're asked to do, what they want to do. Note the fact that they were treated very badly during the 2019 crisis. And then there's the last subject to crop up: how finally, given it's a bit of a vague, undefined area, to tackle ethics. Well, we've done some acclimatization exercises for people, and you have to present ethics in a simple, effective, and operational manner. And this has been defined by various agencies. There needs to be a collective approach in the agency. And the idea is to gain general knowledge. But the materialization is essentially, will it render ethics visible? And now, the search for formalism around ethics is expected and has to be adapted to every given situation, whilst developing a conceptual approach to raising awareness to the matter. And what cropped up time and again, and others need, is a search for in-depth thinking areas, or I think this, you need to create space, psychological space, but also breathing space. That's the way we we're able to reflect about things. And we have to see what the colleges, what people are going to do with the ethics committee. And we need to get several brains around the table developing a shared culture. And there need to be times where we can exchange views, share experience, So these are some ideas similar to the ones we had at the very beginning, and these are awareness-raising measures for small quizzes and the last point, what reception of the document, ethical affairs, how has it been received, the document, ethical reference points. They fear they might oblige him to ask questions, and very topical hot potatoes. What we want is something as simple. Now for the workshops, they was perceived as a growing awareness of the need for a collective approach to and now we've been organizing interviews, and they've done from the beginning of March through to April. Some people took part in the second interview, and to wrap up, there could be a transition for what will be said later by agents. The workshops are key moments, which are key importance for agency. There you are. Thank you very much for your kind attention. To apologise as the lady was speaking at top speed.